Jim came to Moeller and played something for him on a pad, and Moeller kind of stopped him after a couple of bars and said to him, "Kid, you don't know anything, don't you?" The next thing was Jim showed Moeller that he had bought his book. He said, "Mr. Moeller, I bought your book." And with an impression of deep disappointment, Moeller said, "Jim, I wish you hadn't bought the book. The book is all wrong." To me, still, one of the most important takeaways is that the Moeller upstroke is indicated by the hand, by the movement of the wrist. You know, if Jim was here, he would say, this is a downstroke, a tap, and an upstroke. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down. When you would play something like this, you would make sure that your stick consistently stays in motion. You never hold down the stick. Another thing to watch out for when you practice this really is to not move up too soon. Today is a very special thing for me because it's all about my dear friend and mentor and role model and another drumming superhero by the name of James Forbes Chapin, and his life and times and teachings and stories and his, super detailed view on what it actually is exactly that a piece of wood can do inside a human hand, which is pretty remarkable. And before Moeller, actually no one else undertook that effort, and Moeller forwarded that tradition on to his master students, or his master student, Jim Chapin, James Forbes Chapin. And the interesting thing here is that according to Moeller's own words, Jim Chapin was by far his master student who actually understood his methods and his teachings the best from all of his other students. So you may know it or not, but starting my little lecture here really from Sanford Moeller, 2026 is actually 100 years of the Moeller book, in case you didn't know. So it's really released 1926, The Art of Snare Drumming, written and compiled by Sanford Augustus Moeller, also referred to as the Moeller book. So here we are, and let me, before we move some wood and hit some plastic and rubber, I have fond memories of a lot of lessons I took with Chapin, and also a lot of lessons that I watched Chapin do. And once I asked Jim, you have any memories of your very first lesson with Sanford Moeller? And he said, oh yes, I have. And two things stood out that I still remember. Number one was when Jim came to Moeller and played something for him on a pad, and Moeller kind of stopped him after a couple of bars and said to him, "Kid, you don't know anything, don't you?" And Jim was under the impression that he also could play a little bit, having studied with a local New York teacher by the name of Ben Silver back in the day. But obviously it was not that overwhelming, which brought Moeller to the statement, "Okay, kid, you don't know anything, don't you?" And the next thing was that Jim showed Moeller that he had bought his book. He said, "Mr. Moeller, I bought your book." And with a, impression of deep disappointment, Moeller said, "Jim, I wish you hadn't bought the book. The book is all wrong." So, what an impression from the very first lesson that you have. And to give this a bit more substance, we can understand that Sanford Moeller was the inventor of the upstroke, really, because no other drum educator before him really spoke about the upstroke and different fashions of movement that much in detail as Sanford Moeller did. So at a later point in the lesson, Moeller said to Chapin, "Jim, I discovered the upstroke, I fell in love with it, and I ruined it." So let me read to you what the Moeller book says about the upstroke. And it's kind of interesting, so just for you to keep this in mind. The upstroke. There is a movement used by good drummers that is seldom spoken of, but is left for the pupil to get by observing his teacher or fall into from necessity. Interesting. There is nothing new about it, former books merely overlooking its definition. So what Moeller says, the upstroke has always been there. Teachers don't really speak that much about it. Some students pick it up just subconsciously, but it's important to have it down. So he continues, the descriptive name upstroke comes to it naturally. It consists of tapping the drum while the hand is rising. Tapping the drum while the hand is rising. Interesting. And he continues, rudimental drumming is the science of hand, time, position, stroke, accent. Very cool. It is generally known that there is such a system for every other instrument, but that there is a beautifully perfected school of drumming is generally unknown. I mean, all these words that I read to you now are the words of a very thoughtful educator who really looks into the details, and that is actually how he came up with what people nowadays refer to as the Moeller system or Moeller technique, for which Jim Chapin can be looked at as the master student. So that in itself is kind of interesting to take away from here. So with that in mind, to me still one of the most important takeaways is that the Moeller upstroke is indicated by the hand, by the movement of the wrist at the time of the hit. So if you do something like this, for instance, if Jim was here, he would say this is a downstroke, a tap, and an upstroke. Down, up, 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 down. You may think, wait a second, a downstroke, a tap, and the upstroke, but I see the tip of the stick is almost exactly in the same place all the time. Really? So if you watch the tip of my stick, you don't see a lot of up and down, right? Don't you? But if you watch my hand, you obviously see down, up, 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 down. So the up and down in Moeller technique relates to the movement of the hand at the time of the wrist. And if someone tells you this is Moeller technique, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, this is pretty much as much Moeller technique as North Korea would be democracy, right? So it's not Moeller technique because one important thing is missing, which is the ability to let the stick rebound. And this important source of energy is the crucial difference in understanding the ups and downs here. So, and honestly, if that's the only thing you're going to take away from this lesson, it was worth the time. So next time when you do something like this, and you catch yourself holding the stick down, be aware of North Korea. Just saying. So what you see here is my stick consistently stays in motion, and when you practice that for yourself, you should see this in the mirror. And Jim was a great believer in mirrors. And I remember one of his quotes that he would use when he taught me or also other people. He would say, "Give me 20 minutes daily in front of the mirror. And when you go on stage, forget you know me." How cool is that? Because he wanted to make sure that you don't think about technique when you go on stage and make music. So thinking about technique and those detailed structures of motion, that is only something he wanted you to be involved with when you were practicing. But for God's sake, not when you go on stage and try to make music. So here's a couple of things, let me call it a number of frequent misconceptions that you run into when you find explanations of Moeller technique. So when you would play something like this, you would make sure that your stick consistently stays in motion. That is number one. You never hold down the stick. So the other thing is, let's call it the size of the whip. So this wave-like whipping motion oftentimes was over-exaggerated to whatever degree. But it should be mentioned that Moeller, especially in his late years with students like Jim, for instance, carefully watched out that the wave-like movement was not over-exaggerated at all. He wanted it to be here maybe, but never here. And this is actually what Moeller had in mind when he said, "Jim, I fell in love with the upstroke. I discovered it, I fell in love with it, and I ruined it." He ruined it by over-exaggerating the upstroke, and he even wanted those pictures in the Moeller book, which, thank God, are pretty small, so it's kind of hard to identify what's really going on. But he wanted to have those pictures removed from the book. But his friend Bill Ludwig was saying, "Oh, Gus, the book sells nicely, and it was a hell of a work to put those pictures in, so we just leave it as it is." The book still is like that today. And the misconception of over-exaggerated upstroke is still out there in the world, and it kind of comes back like a zombie, I would almost say. It never goes completely dead. It's there all the time, and it's one of the most common misconceptions, let me call it, about Moeller technique. So another thing to watch out for when you practice this really is to not move up too soon. And that also relates to some degree to the size of the whip. So when you see me do this, you notice I am staying down as much as I can, and I'm only moving up on the third beat of the triplet. I am not moving up in a step-by-step fashion, but it's always this. So a good indicator to track down if you're maybe moving up too soon could be if your free hand plays a shuffle rhythm, and imagine it's just that, but the up and down from the shuffle hand will perfectly be the same as the one on the triplet hand. Watch this. You clearly notice how my forearms move up and down at the very same time. Okay, so that is another pretty important thing to watch out for.
Claus, just a quick question.
Yes, bring it on.
Quick question from Christian, actually. Is this the reason why Jojo, I guess Jojo Meyer, taught it in his DVD like that? Is the moves?
Well, I mean, I really admire Jojo, and we get along really well with each other. And but still, what Jojo actually shows at a relatively slow pace in his DVD is possibly what Jim would advise you to not do. Which doesn't say that Jojo doesn't know how to play drums. We all know that the opposite is the case. It is just that zombie-like coming back of the over-exaggerated upstroke, which Moeller tried to avoid on all accounts, right? So, I mean, you can go with the bigger whip if it's just for the accent, if it's just for one backbeat. You can even go higher, so the screen would not be enough. It would be like this, me destroying the snare. But actually, that is not what would really work in case you were trying to do something like that. How would you? So it's really important to understand that the whip needs to stay at a reasonable level, because anything you go to that degree will not really work. At least it will not work in the way of how Chapin was teaching it, and there was good reason why he did it the way he did it. Let's put it this way. Okay. Also, when you watch my hands, in terms of positioning, you don't notice any sort of switch of the hand position from German to French to whatever, like as I would be preparing some sandwiches or something like that. So the trajectory of the stick is always in the perfect way, a 90-degree angle sort of event, if you will. So if I do that in front of you, you really see that my stick is still bouncing 90%, 90 degrees straight. And I just see a quote that Claude from Luxembourg made. Hey Claude, by the way, long time no see. That our good friend Dom Famularo actually subdivided Moeller Technique in low, half, and full. That is true, and but still, it needs to be said that that Moeller himself and also Chapin did not teach it like that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but the full Moeller, like I need to watch my light bulb over here, the full Moeller doing this, and half Moeller, including a little bit of elbow, and low Moeller being this, is interesting to keep in mind in terms of different dimensions, but you cannot use the full Moeller for that. Still, I see people at times trying to do exactly that, like incorporating the elbow and still trying to do something like this. So what you don't see with me when I'm playing something like that, my elbow is not moving outwards when I do any of this. And also, Moeller really did not teach it in that big style, maybe for a one single stroke, but with the application of rudiments, I mean, that would really hardly happen. And I think one of the reasons why Dom did it that way also has a lot to do with Dom's exposure to Joe Morello being a master student of George Lawrence Stone, where you find the tradition of the full stroke, the half stroke, and the low stroke. So Dom wanted to come up with a parallel fashion of handling Moeller in the same way, which from a standpoint of methodology can be interesting, but is definitely not what Moeller and Jim really taught. I hope that clarifies some more stuff. Good. Before I continue, any other questions that would be related, Simon? Anything?
I think I would ask one question from Yegi. Do you find the upstroke changing in different tempos? Is there a downside in merging the second and the third stroke into an upstroke when the tempos get very high?
That is a very good question, actually, because that is really something which happens. So when you do all of this at a relatively moderate tempo, you still figure, okay, you notice where the upstroke exactly is. At a certain point, the movements kind of merge into each other. The problem is just if you start this merging process way too soon, you lose the benefit of the upstroke if you're already too much up and you cannot collect the energy for the final accent. So when I do something like this here, that's definitely a case of me merging the upstroke to the second and third position, but it's not anymore like just limiting it to only the third position, because that in the end would even make things a bit more, I don't know, stiff and less fluid, if you will. Okay. So I guess that would clarify the question, I think.
Yeah.
Volodymyr sends thumbs up. So okay, so that means mission accomplished. Right. Another thing that both Moeller and also Chapin spoke a lot about is grip and hand position. So so one important takeaway, and that was also like one of the bottom lines in one of the advertising videos that we put out for this meeting is there is no such thing as the one and only position in how you hold a stick. Like Jim really said that if someone tells you there's only one way to hold a stick, run the other way. I have it loud and clear in my memory up here, and it's really like that. So Jim's thing was the softer you play, the more grip may come up, or the more grip may be something which is handled through forefinger and thumb, but the louder you play, the more it moves back in your hand. Not necessarily back on the stick, although you can do that too, but mostly from here to here to here to here, also with different quality in terms of where the stick actually, I should show that here maybe, where the stick kind of touches the palm of your hand. So with anything that is, say, related to Moeller and wrist activity, I feel this contact all the time. This sort of contact with the stick touching the palm of my hand. I never use the whip really for something like that where you have this little tunnel. And how often are we told, oh, it's super important to have this sort of a little tunnel. Yeah, it makes sense if you do certain finger things, but on the whip, it just forces you to pinch the stick more from here, and that pinch really is something which blocks muscles all along the forearm, which really creates problems in terms of how loose and relaxed you can really perform this wave-like motion. So again, the major takeaway is the louder you go, the more you have your stick way back here, which Moeller back in the day used to refer to as the little finger hold, or at times, if you wanted to be a bit more drastic, Jim used to say he called it the flesh hold, whatever that is. But actually leaning back to the traditional, say, rudimental school of drumming, where the right hand stick was mostly held in a fist-like fashion, pretty much like Basel drummers and French drummers still handle it today. So loud is here, soft is here, and medium is anywhere in between. Okay. So I saw that there were quite some questions coming up, and I quickly saw something like traditional grip. Can you read that to me, Simon, so we can address that?
1 second. Yep. Sure. So, how come didn't you start playing traditional grip, Claus?
Well, I mean, Jim played large parts of his life, obviously, traditional grip, because it was the go-to thing back in the day. But he was a huge fan of matched grip, and he was a huge fan of playing open-handed. So I remember I once did an interview with Jim, which I just discovered the other day in a German drum magazine, and that was September 2004. This is how the thing looked like, and there are some nice pictures with Jim in here, and I did the video. I did the interview. No video. I did the interview, and Jim. And towards the end, I asked him, Jim, from a today's standpoint, what would you do differently if you were starting to play drums again? And he said, with hands, not that much, but I would never go back to playing traditional. I would play all matched. Who wants to play traditional? It just sucks. I mean, it was really what he said. And yes, I did study some of the Moeller stuff traditional as well. So, and there are some little leftovers from here too, which you can possibly tell. But Jim actively made me stay away from it. So how do you see this here a bit better? So it's still the same function, and Jim really was, as much as he could, with the back of your hand being at a 90-degree angle. He wouldn't play that from here, which is something that you still see, or that he still saw from Moeller. But I mean, for me, the main reason to stay away from traditional grip is, how would I play open-handed traditional grip with the left hand and make my weak hand still weaker? Is that a smart decision? I thought no to myself. So this is actually why I never really was diving deeper into the realms of traditional grip. Still referring to grip, there is another thing that I would like to point out, because that is also important with relevance to the functions of the whip, to the wave-like motion. So as soon as your position here is too much, let's say, too much French, you have a hard time really executing that. I mean, whatever you can do here will possibly not work that well in the position which Jim often referred to as the French timpani. So if you're playing French, you can do some little things by rotating your forearm. French, you can do some nice finger things. But one thing you cannot do with French grip is using your wrist to actually produce that wave-like motion. So trying this pumping motion, as both Dom and Jim often refer to it, in the French position is not too much of a smart idea. It just works so much better in this position as opposed to this position. Yep. And that is just important to have in mind. And it's not really a matter of how much you practice it, and it will then work for some miraculous reason at some point, but it's just the limitations of a human body and a human wrist. There is just very little room for motion from here, right? So in essence, there is nothing bad about French, and in some instances you really have to use it, but whenever it comes to something like that, using it from here is not what I would really recommend. All right? So I saw a couple of questions popping up which may refer to this actually. Is there something where we should dive in, Simon, you think?
There is one question, actually a request, if you could show how to apply the Moeller technique to play fast bop on the right cymbal, like a bebop pattern on the right cymbal.
Okay. Well, first of all, and I'm sorry that my answer might be a little bit disappointing, but I would not really use Moeller technique for exactly that application. So let's say for a fast jazz cymbal pattern, and this is not even what I would do. It would also be the answer that you'd get from Jim at this point in time. It would be mostly something like this. So what you see here is really something which really doesn't address very much to the motion of the whip for different reasons. And possibly the most important reason is the whip always has great potential to create volume. But this volume and this strength and this, say, dynamic force which is behind it is possibly what you can't use in a context with something like a fast jazz cymbal pattern. And if Jim was here now, he would say, it's just imagine you're playing a buzz roll. Imagine you're doing this. So it's really something that Jim often related to as opening the buzz, which is something that his contemporary Joe Morello was just a master of. So opening the buzz and just controlling the buzz roll, the closed roll, in a way that you kind of open it up to a clearly defined number of strokes. I mean, it still has you work things from your wrist, but it doesn't remind you at all of this. So I hope that answers the question. Maybe the person who was asking it can send a thumbs up or or the follow-up question. Yes, agree, but whatever. But that would be my answer from here before we open another little can of worms. Yes, Q. Thank you. Okay. All right. So there is, a lot of interesting things to say still about anything related to the whip and its mechanics and the do's and don'ts. But there is one more thing that that Moeller also included into his, say, view of the technical world, and he related to that as the so-called pull-out. And this is very likely also something where you find a lot of room for misconception from the highest ranks, I should say. And let me connect this with a little story which I don't always tell people, say in public, as we are here now. This goes back to the early mid 90s, where I was taking the first bunch of lessons parallel from Dom and Chapin. So this might be 94, something like that, 93, 94 maybe. Like in the mornings I would work with Dom because he was up at sunrise, and in the afternoon I would study with Chapin. So I remember times when I was working with both on what they refer to as the pullout. And with Dom, I always noticed when he spoke about the pullout, what he had in mind was this. Essentially, a Moeller upstroke, Moeller downstroke. Whenever I worked with Chapin on the pullouts, it was this. A fashion in which he was kind of squeezing the stick, but not using the wave-like motion, not using the whip. And there's a handwritten script that I would like to read to you before we go further here. And Jim says, pull-out accents are made at the end of a normal series of taps by squeezing at the last moment and pulling the tips away. These are the build for the roughs, and he says the same patterns can also be played by alternating up-down strokes. So what Jim actually was teaching and how Moeller was teaching those pullouts was a normal series of taps and then squeezing the stick at the last moment and pulling the tips away from the surface. So what you see here is really not, but, and this was something he noticed the veterans that he watched in the mid-1920s were doing when they, for instance, were playing a good open roll. And a lot of these early rudimental drummers actually started their studies with paying good attention to not losing the presence of the second beat of the double stroke roll. But, I mean, needless to say that this strategy of Moeller up and down only takes you to a certain limit. It maybe takes you to here or slightly above that, but it does for sure not take you to here. How would you? And Moeller and Chapin understood that. And so I'm continuing with my story here. And at some point I said to Jim, I'm studying here now with you and Dom, and it's amazing. I'm learning such a lot. This is kind of refiguring all of my playing, and I feel this is the entry to understanding a whole new world of drumming. But here's this one question: when Dom speaks of pullouts, he refers to this. When you speak of pullouts, you show me this. So why are you using the same nomenclature, the same word, for a different kind of motion? How is that? And Jim, this is, I quote, and this is, Dom, he has it from Morello. And Morello, he has it from Stone. And I showed it to Stone, but Stone screwed it up. And I say, wait a second. You're speaking about George Lawrence Stone, right now, don't you? I said, yes. And I said, wait a second. So you're telling me you showed the pullout to Stone? How is that? And Jim said, yes, Stone wanted to know if Chapin was playing the Moeller system like it is described in the book that Moeller was not happy about. So Stone wanted to have clarification. And in his very passionate, enthusiastic way that Jim was always using, he most likely kind of also created a certain amount of confusion with George Lawrence Stone. That is what I suspect. And from there, what you get to see is that students who are more influenced from the Stone Morello side, they may still look at a pull-out just as a different name for a Moeller up and down stroke. While the students that came more through the Chapin tradition, they refer to pull-outs as something in which you're squeezing the stick into the hand, very much like you do on what people today may refer to as a push-pull activity, but push-pull is not squeezing as hard as the pull-out. So with the pull-out, the stick really is squeezed into the hand as such as you're just not able to continue playing anymore from here if you really do that. But if you do this and you're only applying relatively little pressure, that chain of strokes can continue. So some people would also relate to that as Gladstone technique, although it's kind of a little bit of a speculation if we say Gladstone technique, because we have no books, we have no written evidence, we have no videos, of course, from Billy Gladstone explaining about that. But again, this is almost like a little piece of hidden knowledge that Moeller technique also not just includes the whip, but also has room for this finger squeeze, which Moeller referred to as pull out, because the veterans were saying, Gus, you just pull the sound out of the drum. This is where the name actually came from, and Jim, in his video, Speed, Power, Control, Endurance, used to reference a hot surface that you're touching with your finger. So the first time you're wetting your finger and you're touching that hot surface, and the second time you feel it hurts and you're pulling your hand away. And he wanted you to really exactly execute that, which is pull out. And whenever Dom, for instance, was saying, oh, wait a second, Jim, isn't that a pull out? Jim would make fun of him and say, you know, Dom, or fam, as he would say fam, he wouldn't say Dom, he would say fam, that's a pull in. You're pulling down, you're pulling in, you're holding it down. The pull out's this. So I remember very funny evenings in the garden of Dom's house, having barbecue, drinking red wine, sitting together with these two legends, and me just leaning back, listening and inhaling all that drum wisdom. All right. So we possibly have collected a number of questions here still that I can address as we are slightly descending here with this little Jim story exercise Moeller thing.
I've got a few questions, Klaus.
Yep.
The first one, does Moeller actually works in France timpani style too? Or in French timpani style too? Maybe that was a question. So does Moeller actually works in French timpani style as well?
Well, it depends on what you have in mind. From my perspective, the pumping motion works at its best if you're not French. If you only relate to like a little bit of a backbeat where you're kind of turning in, that can work French just as well, but you need to rotate inside because your wrist in this position has very little room for movement. So it does possibly for backbeats, but not really not really for that. That would be my fast answer, which I think should do the job. Anything else?
Yeah, great. So the next one, could you explain the basics of collapsed rudiments? Or
Well,
should we ask other questions first? Maybe the shorter ones.
I mean, collapsing a rudiment, collapsing and expanding, has a lot to do with changing the distances between the notes without changing the initial sticking. You can try similar things like that also with elements of Moeller technique. Like for instance, you could say, if you do this, which we essentially have been looking into like for the last 45 minutes, and imagine I do this, and my right hand stays in place. It always stays here with the pulse from the bass drum, and I'm just slowing down my left hand at certain points in time. So from here, from unison, I go into a mouth, I go into 16th note triplet, now my left hand is accenting the second beat of the triplet. I'm slowing down, I'm getting to here, still slowing down, now my left hand is accenting the third beat of the triplet, slowing down to 16th notes, still slowing down, and I arrive at the starting point again. So that in itself, structure-wise, is pretty simple. If you try to play it, it's just ridiculously hard. And it's also one of the exercises from the Collapsed Rudiments book, which is out now since a couple of weeks and months. But that in itself would yet be a different field of studies. And it was actually, of course, a Chapin thing. He tried to write papers beginning by the mid-60s where you find the words collapsed and writing things like, okay, flam taps are collapsed threes. So he would sort of discover these things, which I think no one did before him. It's just another thing where Jim was the first guy who noticed something. a true genius. Okay, next question, Simon.
Awesome. Yeah, is there a change in the rebound of the stick when we change the way we hold the stick, like you described for different dynamics? And is it something that we should be utilizing when we play?
It kind of does. So when you hold the stick more up front, more from here, obviously you may find a bit more rebound, a bit more reaction in the stick, but you may find it hard to produce more power and more volume. And it's still an interesting question that how should I say this? With some students and also with some of the courses at Open-Minded Drumming, I'm utilizing this early rudimental style fist-like grip. So when you do this, honestly, I can't even say where I exactly hold the stick. It's just in my fist. And exploring and discovering rebound as you hold the stick in different ways is a very essential thing for your personal development. So Jim would also encourage you at times to hold a stick like this, like balafon players do at times. So he would say, yeah, try this, and still play. I mean, lightning fast stuff, or you have it between middle finger and ring finger, like in that fashion. and it would still work. Or you would even have this, just to prove people that he was not working from his fingers, but it was all the sheer power of the whip. But yes, rebound changes when you hold the stick differently. It's just you need to track down what exactly it is and how it feels exactly for you. It's not something that you read in a book and then you adapt it and it works right away. It's something you need to explore, and the only way to explore that is by having a teacher who is not just holding it down to this one and only option of how you supposedly hold the stick in the only correct fashion. That I find dangerous. Yep, another one, Simon. Bring it on.
Yep, I'm just unmuting myself. Great. What do you think, Klaus, in which category would fall the gravity blast beat technique?
Well, I mean, oftentimes what we
surely must know.
Oftentimes what we find is really like old wine in new bottles. So I understand the like stuff like that, right? I mean, for sure not Moeller, but as every good technique, or as every sort of technique in itself, it relates to rebound. It relates to understanding the reaction that the stick is offering you. And if you suppress that, you're in trouble no matter what technique you're using. And I mean, this gravity blast thing is not something I was really interested in, which doesn't say it's bad or not good or out of fashion, whatever. It's just something that I personally never got into. So, I mean, if we're you, I'm not sure what the name was of the person who asked the question, I would ask, my personal reference would be Johnny Rabb. And I think from my understanding, he's that guy who uses it just always in a super musical fashion, and he just shakes it off once it seems appropriate. To me, he is the master of really applying this.
Sounds great. Okay, here's another question. How do you approach using all these different drumming techniques on the kit? When do you decide which technique to use? That's the question.
Which technique in
So basically, how you approach all these different techniques that you use when you play around the kit, and when do you decide which technique you use or you choose to use for certain things?
Well, oftentimes it's really what you have in mind. Like you have a certain vision of what you would like to do, and you're experimenting what could be the best way to achieve that. And so that's one way to look at things. The other option is you embrace a certain technique, you work with it, and then you just simply explore what is possible with that. And oftentimes what you find will not always be usable in real world musical applications. Like say when I figured that I don't know, something like this. And I just figured using Jim's technique would just be perfect to play an ostinato like that. I have no idea in what kind of style of music I would do that, other than maybe using it for solo-like applications. But I think the important answer here is to that question, you need to be open to both avenues. You need to be open to that avenue of, okay, I may have to discover something based on the techniques that I found with the giants, the drumming giants that came before me, or I just embrace one of these techniques and I just go down the wormhole and down the rabbit hole and I try to find out, okay, what is it that I can do with that? And can I build a nuclear weapon out of this? These are actually the two important questions you need to ask yourself. And try to avoid the wording right and wrong. Because I think in drumming, there is no such thing as right and wrong, but it's important to understand the consequences of what you're doing. And if you suppress rebound, you're going to have trouble. If your stick is not flying straight, you may encounter trouble. If you're using a hand position which is not appropriate for something that you're trying to play, you will be in trouble. If you play against the laws of physics and nature and human anatomy, you will be in trouble. And understanding the consequences of what you do, this is actually what it all comes down to. I truly believe. Yep.
Awesome. Here's another interesting one. Can one apply the Moeller in fast orchestra playing? This is pretty interesting because there's always this conversations about different ways of holding the sticks when we play contemporary drums and then classical drums. So
yeah, I mean the use of the whip with orchestral snare drum playing, I don't see that much, mostly for dynamic reasons. But I could very much imagine that certain aspects of wait, I'm just trying to find some other stick here. But let's say if you have like certain applications of the pull-out, and like say so something like that could very much be something that I could imagine, where you do this, so that might be something like as for instance you find it with Scheherazade or Diebische Elster, or certain orchestral passages that require for pretty dense, fast combinations of notes. That I can imagine. The use of the whip, most likely not, because because that violinist in front of you in the orchestra pit may jump off the chair and drop dead like on spot, just for dynamic reasons. All right.
That's great. We still got time for a couple of more questions. Was there any favorite exercise or sticking of Jim?
I can think of many, and I have actually brought a little bit of a folder here, which is my stuff that I did that I wrote down with Jim. So it's a couple of pages, as you can tell. But one that I remember that he really liked a lot, let me see, was this. Wait a second. So he liked the idea of, at first, just having the accents 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and having the sticks really not be held down, but letting the sticks react, and then looking at these single beats as the accents for and then just isolating one hand, and then same with left. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Right hand only. Stop on 4. Starting left. If you want, guys, let's try this slow. Imagine one, two, three, four. Left, right, 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 left only. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, left, alternating, and so forth. So that was, for instance, something that he really liked because it included the aspect of rebound and including the aspect of what Moeller related to as stop at the top and not stop at the bottom and suppress rebound. So stopping at the top, how Moeller and Chapin called it, was actually the parallel stroke, if you will, to George Lawrence Stone free stroke / full stroke, and also to Billy Gladstone's catching the bounce. And so this way it kind of incorporated different aspects of letting the stick react and then having the function of both hands and then just isolating one hand and then switching to the different lead hand. So I remember that as an exercise that Jim often was using and that he never really had actually in his handwritten stuff here. So a lot of things he came up with on spot, and some of them he forgot and he never got back to it later. And just today I rediscovered quite some of them, which I found, okay, this is actually really interesting, but how come I forgot about that? So that session today was a welcome opportunity to really dive into this vast arrangement of exercises that we collected in the lessons. Yep. All right.
Awesome. Here's another one still. Claus, how would you use Moeller technique when the accent is on the third beat, like playing North African 6/8? Mm-hmm. And Nasser mm-hmm. mentioned that my friend David Garibaldi calls it the North African shuffle.
So Adi, you're actually relating to like some like this, you say?
If on the third beat wouldn't be like a halftime shuffle? Oh no, yeah, he's right, Nasser is right, yeah.
Okay, so the interesting thing here is that there is, if I were to leave out my foot, you will not see any difference if I'm playing this, right? This could be it could also be or back, and so the mechanics of how you use is actually pretty much the same. And if you use that in drum set context, like imagine. like say this, a pretty cool way to practice that would be to spend some time in front of the mirror and just play this pattern with the right hand, left hand, then both hands. Left hand, both. And then starting again, and it just depends on how for the duration that you spend with all of these, and it's for sure a very useful thing for any sort of North African or also West African styles, like any sort of Lukumi music or Yoruba sort of stuff, and or like that little example that I just gave you with the more, say, Abakwa 4-note grouping taste towards it. You find lots of interesting applications in which Moeller can be a super useful tool when you play those styles of music. Yeah, good question.
I think you can also find a lot of information in the Bembe course.
Absolutely, there are quite some interesting examples with the Bembe course at Open-Minded Drumming. So if you want to check that out, you could find a lot of interesting hints towards how you could apply Moeller in that stylistic corner of Planet Drum. That could be really something. Yeah, good call, Sam.
Sounds great. Yeah. So before we're going to wrap up, maybe two last questions. The first one is, Claus, what is the bridge between a drop clutch plus finger stroke into Moeller? How to approach with students navigating that transition in their technique?
Can you read it once again to me?
What is the bridge between the drop catch plus finger stroke into Moeller? Drop catch plus finger stroke.
So I understand.
It's a question from Teresa. So I don't know if you don't understand it fully. Maybe Teresa could explain it more by unmuting herself if she wants. If not, give it a shot. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean.
Teresa, would you like to ask the question or explain? I'm not sure.
Well, I have some sort of a clue.
All right. Give it a shot.
So maybe the idea is that drop catch relating to something like that, and the thing with Moeller is, of course, you include the forearm. So one important takeaway here that Moeller actually usually does not work without your arm. It's like a competition in ass kicking for people with only one leg. So
Hi there, Claus. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry, I'm at work, so I had to go into a closet at work to ask my question. I am working on a shuffle, and so I've been mainly working on the wrist dropping to achieve a full rebound, and then using my middle finger to get some power. So I've been stuck at that level with my technique of working on a shuffle. But when it comes to more advanced fills that I'm trying to achieve, I do think I would benefit from Moeller, but I didn't know if there is a relationship between initially working on letting the wrist fully drop and then using a finger stroke to develop a shuffle into more advanced Moeller and push-pull. And I think I'm just confused about if they are related even. Does that make sense?
It kind of, and what we see here is just also to some degree a little bit of a challenge with all of these different pieces of nomenclature that at times describe the same thing, or with little or no variations in how people actually move. So when you say you play a shuffle, would that mean you're trying to do something like this?
Correct. It really is more a full, like my wrist all the way drops, and then I've been working on the stick rebounding fully up. and then achieving the second stroke with just my middle finger. That's how I've been, because my hands are very caveman, stuck in, holding the stick really tight. So
okay.
And I've had two teachers talk to me about really relaxing my hand almost. I don't know if maybe I can.
Claus, Teresa, she's referring to, for instance, when Dom shows the full stroke and just leaving the wrist down while the stick comes back. So she was practicing this basic stroke when you let the stick bounce back, but the wrist stays down. Yeah, this one. That's what Teresa is practicing. And she wants to turn it probably into the full Moeller motion, or utilizing the up and down wave-like motion. I think so.
Well, to me, it sounds a little bit like, if you were to use Moeller for that, it could be an application of up and down. And for that, you're not really working actively from your fingers. It's just the whip. Or if you were to go way faster, it would be something which I just described as the pull-out.
Okay.
Like opening, let's say opening the hand, and then for an accent, squeezing the stick back into the hand. So that's option number one, which possibly can already do the job. So I wouldn't even say there is a good and a bad solution to that. If you try the pull-out variation, you may find yourself also looking into faster tempos. If you look more towards the Moeller up-down, you will have more potential towards dynamics and volume, but less towards speed. Mostly because of that one single thing, because you're using way more of your anatomy and more arm and big motions, as opposed to here, where you only using those small fingery aspects here. So that would be, to me, the fast solution. The rest would be like working with you and diving into the wormholes. Oh, okay, you do this, then rather try that. But pull out versus the Moeller up down.
And that previous exercise you showed with one-sidedness and then going alternating,
yeah.
I think I would benefit from that with focus on these kind of motions.
I mean, that could be something, but mostly maybe just having the accent towards the end of a series of strokes. That could even include something like.
Okay.
Right, left, 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 right, 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 left, 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 right, right, right. Because that eventually also has your shuffle rhythm, but still one extra reaction from the stick in between.
Got it.
Right? So that could be helpful to further investigate on the ability from the stick to react. And Jim would say, you got to give the stick a wish of its own. That is just number one. Give the stick a wish of its own.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Teresa.
I'll try not to get fired.
And the course on technique at Open-Minded Drumming actually explains all the details about the basics, and so you may want to also check that out. On that note, Claus, I think we have to wrap things up. And so before we're going to end this meeting, maybe I think this last question could do it pretty well, and maybe you could mention a couple of words about the courses at Open-Minded Drumming that you prepared, and Annika. So basically, the question is, do you think it is possible to achieve a serious level of drumming without a teacher? Well, if you have open-minded drumming, then yes. But on the serious note, maybe you could say a little bit on that and.
Well, yeah, it really depends. I have seen situations where it would have been better if a certain student would have rather gone without a teacher, and I have seen situations where a good and reliable teacher just helps you to avoid all the don'ts and all the things that you had better left out. I mean, this is really where a good teacher comes in. I feel, a lot of Moeller technique came into the drumming world by trial and error, because those army drummers, they were just confronted with the idea of, okay, we need to play that drum from sunrise to sundown, and we need to find the most streamlined, reasonable way of doing that without having our arms fall off because we do some weird things. So what Moeller actually analyzed with those army veterans was really a product of, how they had been taught and what they came up with in terms of solutions that made them survive the daily life in the drumming daily life in the army. So on the one hand, yes, it is possible to achieve a pretty serious level of drumming without a teacher, provided you are very disciplined, you watch yourself, and you are super critical with yourself, and you spend enough time in front of the mirror, and you really go down the rabbit holes. If you just do it in front of the TV or whatever, and yeah, you can have fun too, but don't expect wonders from here. And with regards to open-minded drumming, I feel the courses that we produced are actually as close as to a personal one-on-one lesson as a pre-produced video course can actually be, with the different camera options and angles, and with all of the audio files that we recorded live, so you don't hear any sort of digital whatever. You hear myself or Annika or Ramon or Claudio recording that here in our basements or with Open-Minded Drumming while we're over for the yearly camp. So that makes a lot of difference, and I feel it can be a drastic shortcut that helps you avoid a lot of extra time that you don't want to waste effort and work, if that makes sense. So I would really look forward to, and this goes out to anyone who's seeing this for the very first time and is new to Open-Minded Drumming. I would love to welcome you back and see how your hands are doing, and we collect topics like every month and meet to just practice together, besides all of the stuff which you will end up finding on the platform. But there's more information about that comes to you from Simon directly. I'm just a workhorse here, but I enjoy it, believe me.